Whoa, a presidential debate already? In June? But it's summer, shouldn't we all be having picnics and going to the beach? Well, the Biden campaign made an interesting gambit trying to have this debate earlier than normal. They know that they're behind and they want to change the narrative early. And that narrative is all around Biden's age. At 81, Biden has slowed down significantly, as voters cite his age as their number one concern about the president. So the goal for this debate is simple. Biden has to be energetic and forceful, still showing Americans that he's up to another 4 years in office. As for Trump, he's going to want to sound sharp in contrast, but he also should try and get out of his own way a little bit, and hopefully tamp down his narcissistic impulses that turn him off to so many voters. So Biden needs to not seem old, and Trump needs to not seem like a jerk. Let's start with Biden. Right off the bat, his voice is hoarse, his lifelong stutters return with a vengeance, and he loses his train of thought mid-sentence.
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president. What Mr. Trump left me. That's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out a position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. With dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
And it seems like he can't breathe through his nose. This causes him to breathe loudly through his mouth before he says something.
To $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year.
It also causes him to leave his mouth open while Trump talks, which isn't exactly something a youthful man does. The Biden campaign said during the debate that he has a cold. If this is true, then it was definitely an interesting choice not to mention that before the debate. Trump, on the other hand, throughout the debate, just defaults to saying that everything he did was the best of all time. He starts by talking about his economy.
We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce back from the COVID.
But Biden suddenly turns it around, taps into his younger self, and responds with force.
He's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, the fact of the matter is that we find ourselves in a situation where his economy, he rewarded the wealthy.
Oh wait, no he didn't. And then he inexplicably brings his biggest failure as president, the Afghanistan withdrawal, into the discussion.
When he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world.
Trump takes advantage and claims if he were president, the withdrawal would have gone smoothly.
As far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
Of course, you can't prove this, but you can't disprove it either. So Trump uses the strategy of this never would have happened if I was president often in the debate. Then he continues to falsely say that the things he did as president were the biggest of all time.
I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history.
Trump pivots to the border, Biden's weakest issue, but he exaggerates so freaking much that he starts to lose credibility on the issue.
Why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
Biden tries to respond with facts and figures, but he can't deliver them nearly cohesive enough for the audience to follow.
What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt.
Trump, on the other hand, makes up his facts, but he delivers them convincingly.
You had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives.
The topic turns to abortion, and Trump uses some smart political instincts to resist his base on the issue, saying he'll leave it to the states instead of supporting an unpopular national ban.
Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, it was a decision that was an end result that was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas, I would say the same thing. Texas is different. Florida is different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion bill, and I agree with their decision to have done that. But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother.
But then he just starts saying crazy, unbelievable lies.
They will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. He's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby.
Like, if you're trying to lie, you'd think you'd go for a little more subtlety. But Trump instead succeeds in this political era due to his lack of subtlety. Biden tries his best to argue that some states are just too extreme on the issue of abortion to not have national regulation.
And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states, let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in, they talk about that. But here's the deal: there's a lot of young women who are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
Biden is then asked what he supports on the abortion issue.
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. If the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress, and they pass a universal ban on abortion, period, across the board, at 6 weeks or 7 or 8 or 10 weeks, something very, very conservative. Is he going to sign that bill? I'll veto it. He'll sign it.
Biden is then pressed on the border and his high number of illegal border crossings as president.
What's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
And he tries to use a planned attack, but he's just not even close.
The only terrorist who's done anything crossing the border is one who came along and killed 3, under his administration, killed an Al-Qaeda person come in his administration, killed 3 American soldiers.
Instead of sticking to the facts on a winning issue for himself, Trump instead tries to scare people with exaggerations and lies.
We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now, all terrorists, all over the world. People that are from prisons, people that are from mental institutions. We had the safest border in history. Now we have the worst border in history. There's never been anything like it. And people are dying all over the place.
Biden starts to come back at Trump with what will be his most effective moment of the night. Not because of his delivery, but because of the content of the attack.
I went to the World War II cemetery, World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
Trump responds by saying the magazine that published the quote, The Atlantic, had just made it up.
First of all, that was a made-up quote, suckers and losers. They made it up. It was in a third-rate magazine that's failing, like many of these magazines.
Then he says Biden made up the quote.
He made up the suckers and losers, so he should apologize to me right now.
4-star general standing to your side who was on your staff who said you said it, period.
The subject turns to the war in Ukraine. Trump says it would have never started if he'd been president.
If we had a real president, a president that knew, that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine.
And Biden argues that he's funding Ukraine because he believes Putin will invade more countries if he succeeds.
He wants to reestablish what was part of the Soviet Empire, not just a piece. He wants all of Ukraine. That's what he wants. And then you think he'll stop there? Do you think he'll stop when if he takes Ukraine? What do you think happens to Poland? What do you think of Belarus? What do you think happens to those NATO countries? All that money we give Ukraine are from weapons we make here in the United States. We give them the weapons, not the money at this point. And our NATO allies have produced as much funding for Ukraine as we have.
The subject turns to Israel, and Biden, knowing that Trump is going to try and be more pro-Israel than him, tries to show his support for the country.
We saved Israel. We are the biggest producer of support for Israel of anyone in the world. And so they're two different things. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. We continue to send our experts and our intelligence people as to how they can get Hamas like we did bin Laden.
Trump then says that Biden is simultaneously not pro-Israel enough and also bad for Palestinians.
He said the only one who wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
Then Trump disregards a question on the issue.
Would you support the creation of an independent Palestinian state in order to achieve peace in the region?
I'd have to see, but before we do that...
Now the subject turns to a bad issue for Trump, January 6th. In response, Trump uses the pivot of a traditional politician.
On January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody coming through, very few. On January 6th, we were energy independent. On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever.
And then he says something that just makes you scratch your head.
And Nancy Pelosi, I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned them down.
The House Speaker obviously doesn't have any power over the National Guard. The president does. In response, Biden tries his best to communicate that no court accepted Trump's so-called evidence of voter fraud.
He went to every single court in the nation. I don't know how many cases. Scores of cases, including the Supreme Court, and they said, no, this guy is responsible for doing what was done.
Trump defends the January 6th insurrectionists and then lies about the January 6th committee.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself. What you have done, how you've destroyed the lives of so many people. They destroyed and deleted all of the information they found because they found out we were right. We were right. And they deleted and destroyed all of the information. They should go to jail for that.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now.
But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level.
Trump, never one to ever admit fault for anything, continues and argues that he's the victim of political persecution.
I did nothing wrong. We'd have a system that was rigged and disgusting. I did nothing wrong.
Biden keeps on the subject of Trump's legal troubles.
And think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about?
I didn't have sex with a porn star, number one.
Another one of Trump's worst of all time, best of all time claims.
His presidency is, without question, the worst presidency in the history of our country.
In Biden's response.
Look, there's a reason why 40 of his 44 top cabinet officers refused to endorse him this time.
The candidates are asked about black voters, and Trump uneloquently ties in the immigration issue.
The fact is that his big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs.
Trump is asked about climate change and just gives nothing.
President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want absolutely immaculate clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O. We had the best numbers ever. I had the best environmental numbers ever. And my top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
Biden, who has the best legislative record on climate change of any president, inexplicably changes the subject.
I've passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history. We find ourselves, and by the way, black colleges. I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities and colleges, because they don't have the kind of contributors that they have. I made sure every company in the world, every pharmaceutical company, cannot have to pay.
Thank you.
And by the way,
Trump then says Biden does what he himself is accused of.
I've never seen anybody lie like this guy. He lies. I've never seen it. He could look you in the face about so many other things, too.
Although people have a right to the truth, to reality, to what is real, Trump is relentless and frankly talented at taking reality away from you.
Everything he does is a lie. It's misinformation and disinformation.
Trump then continues with his lack of subtlety.
If he wins this election, our country doesn't have a chance, not even a chance, of coming out of this rut. We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is. He is the worst in history by far.
Biden tries to get under Trump's skin.
Presidential historians, they've had meetings and they voted who's the worst president in American history. One through best to worst. They said he was the worst in all of American history.
And Trump just starts making things up.
He wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. He wants to raise everybody's taxes by 4 times. He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something.
And then a question about age and fitness for office turns into an argument about whose golf game is better.
He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. And by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest rival. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay, let's
not act like children.
President Trump.
More manipulative, fear-mongering lies from Trump.
He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World War III than anybody can imagine. We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there.
And no affirmation that he'll accept the results if he loses.
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely. I would have much rather accepted these, but the fraud and everything else was ridiculous.
Then Biden nails Trump relatively well on his lies about voter fraud.
You're a whiner. When you lost the first time, you continued, you appealed and appealed to courts all across the country. Not one single court in America said any of your claims had any merit, state or local, none. But you continue to provoke this lie.
And then Biden finally sticks the landing with his closing statement, finishing strong.
He wants to get away with, get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35.
Oh, I was just kidding. And that's it. The worst presidential debate of all time. Hope you enjoyed. What do you guys think? What would you do if you were running any of their campaigns? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing what you guys have to say. It really makes my day. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time.